All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're from. I'm Leo, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. Thank you for being here today. We'll get started off with the third step prayer.
Which is on page 63 of your big book. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
All right. All right. As we were just saying, it's on page 6, about two-thirds of the way down. Uh, let's go ahead and jump up one paragraph and start there, and then we'll jump into this.
You got it.
Yeah.
Page 6, everybody. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street, lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night plate supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. The morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So 2 bottles and oblivion.
Yeah, and so kind of jumping into this, this is just to equate to us and who we are and that type of thing. But um, this is common for us. I remember, getting up and being jittery and thinking to myself that I was um, I thought it was more of a physical problem that I was having, and really what it, and even though it was, but it was my withdrawal from the alcohol. By lunchtime, I was drinking again, just to calm things down, and that was quite the deal. I also getting up in this remorse and horror and hopelessness and looking around, wanting to take back what happened the night prior. Can't stand myself, kind of the attitude, wanting to reach out to people and say that you're sorry and hoping that they'll accept your apology, all to find out that most of them wouldn't at that point, and then feeling even worse for that. It's an incredibly just strong negative feeling that I think is uh, is something that we all get a release from once we've found this higher power and this ability to stop drinking. Courage to do battle was not there. That uh, again, that hopelessness and having kind of that kind of panic attack with the brain racing uncontrollably. So this happening over and over is just a bad thing. And what am I going to do with myself? In this case, Bill is thinking about killing himself, but then decides not to. And what a deal! But obviously, more alcohol poured on the problem fixes the jitters and gets you kind of in a calm place, and then there you are. So, Rob?
Yeah, I just want to say that on page 4, when the stock market went to hell and people were killing themselves, Bill wanted nothing to do with that. He thought, but now 2 pages over, page 6, now Bill is thinking about killing himself. You know, one of the lines here is the courage to do battle was not there. He's given up. He just doesn't see any way around it. He's drinking for oblivion. He just can't do it. So 2 bottles and oblivion. He's escaping from himself now. The mind and body are a marvelous mechanism. For mine endured this agony 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Again I swayed dizzily before an open window, or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, lest I suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight.
Wow. So this is really, he's really hitting his bottom at this point. He's actually definitely worried about suicide. He drags his mattress down to the basement, as I understand it, just to ensure that he was not going to jump and harm himself in any way. He was doing this for 2 years, 2 more years. That's just amazing, Rob. The idea of just being just in this constant state of inebriation, and then being to the point that you're 40 pounds underweight. You can only imagine, because I don't think that Bill was that large of a person, and so that really made him look gaunt, I'm sure. And so this is really I'm trying to find the word. It's not tragic, but he definitely is hitting his bottom. Rob?
Yeah, he certainly is. Who else was taking sedatives in order to steady the nerve and then drinking? Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob was doing the same thing for 17 years. And when you get into Dr. Bob's nightmare, you realize what this poor guy did. He had to steady his nerves first thing in the morning so he'd take a sedative. Okay. Then that way you go to work. He's a proctologist. So, who wants a surgeon that's hands are shaking like crazy? Nobody. Who's going to have faith in that type of doctor? So, but for 17 years, Dr. Bob did the same thing over and over. Every day was like Groundhog Day. Wake up. Okay. Only to make it through part of the day in order to make them enough money so you can buy alcohol, so that you can drink yourself to oblivion at night, so you can get some sleep, pass out. Sad. And you wonder why, people, a lot of the solution for a lot of alcohol is suicide. They don't see a solution. They have no way of out of it. They just see, well, everybody is so disappointed in me. Everybody is so frustrated by me, you know, and I have no solution. That's why it's important for us who have the solution contained in this book that we talk to people, we help people, we tell them we have a solution. If you're willing to do a few simple things. Bill, as Leo said, Bill was about 6'2", 6'3". He was not a heavy guy. And to be 40 pounds underweight, you can imagine what Bill looked like. Especially in those days, a man always wore a suit. So the suit, I'm sure, was just hanging off him.
Yeah.
We're on page 7, everybody. My brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill, bodily and mentally.
Yeah, so we're talking about Bill's brother-in-law, who's a physician. That would have been Leonard Strong. And this nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics was Towns Hospital. This would be the first time that Bill would be put into a hospital setting. And I think the year was 1933 when he did this. And this is also a time when he's trying to get treatment. And he also mentions for one of the first times is the being seriously ill bodily and mentally, which is the allergy and the malady. which we'll find out are the two symptoms of alcoholism as we go forward. So a couple of things are going in, at least in the positive direction for Bill. Rob?
Yeah, the belladonna treatment, the puke and purge. Basically, they give you this stuff and it makes you sick. It gets the alcohol out of your system. Basically, the town's hospital were drying people out in 4 or 5 day treatments and sending them on their way. Nothing changed. You know, they would tell you, if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to kill yourself. Body parts will shut down, delirium tremens, things like that will happen. But basically, nothing was changing in their life. A lot of people who went to the town for the treatment, okay, all they wanted was to get people off their back. It was not a cheap place to go. It cost Bill about $125 each time he went, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but we're talking 1930s money, not 2020s. Okay, so that was a lot of money, especially when rent was about well, Bill, when he got stepping stones, now he got a pretty good deal on it. It was costing him $40 a month when he got stepping stones. That was his mortgage, $40 a month. So to spend $125 at Towns Hospital was a lot of money for Bill. A lot of the other patients that were there were rich people. Okay, so drive them out, send them back out, but nothing is changing. Nothing is changing. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. Why would you do something different? It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other aspects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge.
Oh yeah, self-knowledge, that self-will. We just, as we know, is enough to get you through some white knuckling phases, but unfortunately, you fail and relapse. But one of the things that is that is baffling for alcoholics is that will to be able to make decisions on normal day-to-day kind of things and do that well and do it successfully. Yet with your will and your strength to be able to stop drinking just isn't there. And it just really drives people crazy that they can't just decide to stop drinking. And otherwise they would be, as we call, a normie or a normal person or a normal drinker. The But his behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. So at least he knew that he wasn't able to stop. But there again, he was in this kind of the white knuckling phase. He was able to do it for 3 or 4 months, and things were going well for him. But unfortunately, they don't end up that way. So, Rob?
Yeah, I put something in the chat, and hopefully you get to see it or take a look at it. And it's about Bill and his different attempts to try to stop drinking. But one of the things is Dr. Silkworth talking to Lois, and I'm just going to read that, and it's in the chat. The benign little doctor's face turned grave as he began to speak. Quote, when Bill first came to this hospital 3 years ago, I felt that he might be one of those rare cases who might recover. I hoped that when he better understood himself and the nature of his illness, he might win out. In spite of his several severe relapses since then, I have gone on hoping. For as you say, he desperately wants to quit, and his will to do so is very great. But now I'm discouraged. I'm afraid he's going to be like nearly all the other alcoholics who come my way. And this is the main problem is its obsessional nature, one of the most powerful compulsions known. And this is from The Strange Obsession, which was an article written by Dr. Silkworth. So, poor Bill, like I feel bad, but as I say, nothing is changing. He's doing the same things over and over. He was able to quit drinking for a short period of time, you know, but then he goes back to alcohol. Why? And this is what Bill was asking himself. Why do I keep going back to something I don't want to do? You know, Dr. Silkworth knew about the allergy that once alcohol is ingested into the system, that we want more. So why do we take that first drink? And we'll get into that a little bit later. And remember, for 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. In other words, Bill was not drinking. He was able to go to work and make money. Why did he change? Why did he go back to drinking? That's what Bill wants to know. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of the ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish. The curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylums.
Yeah, things are kind of desperate at this point. He's being told that during his DTs, as we call it, delirium tremens, that he might have end in heart failure. It's a statistic out there that about 15% of people that go through the severe cases of DTs actually pass and don't make it. It's a very dangerous thing to do, and it should be monitored closely by a professional. And it really is something that has to be taken seriously. This time he's going back to Towns Hospital his second time, and it'd be 1934, and he's in pretty bad shape. And again, kind of weary of the process. He desperately wants to stop, but can't. Doesn't know why necessarily, because he thinks that with all of this self-knowledge that he's able to just make that decision, and it just doesn't come. So, Rob?
Yeah, and I put in the chat what delirium tremens is, and I just put in what wet brain is. Now, wet brain is now known as Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. It's a brain disorder related to the acute and chronic phases of a vitamin B1 thiamine deficiency. Thiamine depletion is seen in individuals with poor nutrition and is a common complication of long-term heavy drinking. It's possible to reverse the symptom when caught early, but when left untreated, wet brain can lead to irreversible confusion, difficulty with muscle coordination, and even hallucinations. So that's why they end up going into sanitariums, or what we call affectionately the nut house. And Bill heard Dr. Silkworth talking to Lois and saw some brochures that Lois had at home. That this is what might be where Bill is headed, unless things change. But what have we noticed has changed in Bill's life so far? The results are nil.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed. So just remember that. Nothing has changed in Bill's life. The drink is taken out of him. He goes to the hospital, they dry him out. They tell him, Bill, if you keep going on the way you're going, you're going to develop delirium tremens or a wet brain. Fear sobered him up for a short period of time. Self-knowledge sobered him up for a short period of time. But nothing has changed in his life. He is still the same Bill that he was before. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. Oh, I've read that part, didn't I?
Yep.
Yeah, they did not. We're right at the bottom of page 7, everybody. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my ability, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who had gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There'd be much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now.
Yeah, the gift of desperation, huh? At getting into that point that you're at your rock bottom, He is totally uh, desperate, and I think at this point we could safely say that he's at a point where he's welcoming the idea of either death or an asylum and being put away permanently. He's thinking of others and wanting to make amends. And this, who had thought so well of himself, my abilities and my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. He finally realizes that he's powerless over alcohol, and there's some good things that are going to end up coming out of that. So, Rob?
Yeah, again, Bill knows what his problem is, that anytime he takes a drink, he wants more, but he can't stop himself from taking that first drink. So he knows what the problem is. He's learned that from Dr. Silkworth. Okay. But he doesn't know what the solution is or the course of action. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit.
Got to go
Then
up
came,
one.
oh, do I go up?
Yep.
Oh, no words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master.
Oh,
Want me to keep going?
yeah, it's just that this is the point that he's finally surrendering, and this is kind of where we're at, that step one, if you will. And he is at that point that all he can do is go up. So that's where we are. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Leo. Thanks for keeping me on course.
Yep.
Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. And on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere, or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes.
Sure. And we are thinking here on Armistice Day, which is now called Veterans Day. I'll let Rob tell the story on that. That was in 1934, and this was approximately a month's worth of drinking, which would be his last round of drinking before he finally finds that spiritual experience and is able to tap into that higher power. So, Rob?
Yeah, no, the thing on Armistice Day, Bill tells us so much better than I do, but I will tell it because I've heard it from Bill quite a few times. I won't do justice to you, Bill. I do apologize beforehand. But Bill was on the bus. He was going to play golf that day. So he's got his golf club. Bill is a guy who will talk to anybody. Okay, he's from a small town, loves everybody, or when he's not drinking, he loves everybody. When he's drinking, becomes quite the opposite and wants to fight everybody, it seems. But anyways, he's on the bus. He sees a guy with a gun who's going to a shooting range. So he talks. Bill had a gun when he was a child and would go out shooting. So he starts talking to this guy. Anyway, the bus gets into an accident. They're all told to get off the bus and to wait for the next bus to come along. Him and the other guy, they go into a bar and they sit there and they start talking. And the other guy has a drink. Bill does not. He says, no, I can't drink. When I do, I lose all control and I'm off to the races. And, I just can't control myself. All hell breaks loose. And the guy says, okay. And so, anyways, the bus comes. They both get on it. They get to their destination of Staten Island. And as they're getting off, the guy goes, you know what? It's lunchtime. Why don't we go in and, have some lunch together? So they go into this bar and they're sitting there talking. And it's Armistice Day, which is known as Veterans Day in the US now. And in Canada, it's known as Remembrance Day. And I assume in Britain, I would believe it's Remembrance Day, but I will be corrected if I'm wrong, and I will write it down. But the bartender comes up and goes, boys, have one on the house for Armistice Day. And Bill just picked up the drink and drank it. His friend that he just made says, "You must be crazy." And Bill says, "I am." And that set Bill on his last debauch. We know now it was his last one, but at the time, it was just he was on his next debauch. Remember, what has changed in Bill's life? He know fear didn't keep him sober, self-knowledge didn't keep him sober, willpower couldn't keep him sober. You know, he knows that he can't take that first drink. He knows that, okay? But he has no solution and no course of action. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through the night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight.
So he's drinking. He is drinking constantly, pretty much 24 hours a day, with the exception of when he's sleeping. He's got alcohol hidden throughout the house. I can attest to that. My garage was my hiding spot, and then I had a couple of places in the house that I was interesting that I had forgotten. They were there, and I would say months. In fact, one was probably a year later. I happened to be doing something, and I found a bottle of stuff that I had hidden. I smiled at myself and was a little embarrassed that I was that kind of alcoholic, but at the same time would just tell you that I know what this is like to have had alcohol hidden about in order to make sure that I could get a drink whenever I wanted it. Um, uh, it was on one hand it was relieving, on the other hand it was alarming. Rob?
Yeah, bleak November. He was drinking by himself.
Mhm.
My musings were interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if I might come over, Ebby Thatcher. He was sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcohol insanity. Wonder how he had escaped. Of course, he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. The very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that.
Oh yeah, and drinkers like to be around other drinkers, and alcoholics certainly are fine being around other alcoholics. We think it's normal, but here we are. Is He's got a telephone call from Ebby Thatcher, who comes over, fresh faced, and they even highlight here, italicized, he was actually sober, and that was um, um, quite the thing, and it took Bill by surprise. But it he um, unmindful, so not paying attention to of his sobriety, and was only really caring about his own drinking. Bill has just decided that he's going to have a drinking buddy, and he'll soon find out that that's not the case. Rob?
Yeah, Ebby Thatcher went to what we call today high school. It was the seminary school, Burton. They went to school together, and so they knew each other as relatively young teenagers. Ebby's family was very rich. They came from Rochester, where the family was well known in politics. Ebby was the runt of the litter, who was sort of I'm going to say a black sheep. And so what they did is they sent him to their summer home in Vermont to get Ebby out of the way, so he wouldn't cause any trouble for them in Rochester. And then that was, if he did cause any trouble, it would all stay in Vermont and wouldn't really get back to Rochester. Ebby got into a few problems with the law. What happened is that he painted the house one day. Some pigeons landed on it. Ebby, being in his cups, being drunk, started firing at the pigeons and was arrested for firing his gun. He goes to to court. The judge is Judge Graves. His son Seabrook, Shep Cornell, and Roland Hazard. Two of them showed up at the courthouse, and well, I'm sure it's going to tell us a little bit more here in a minute, but I'll just go through it. Anyway, Seabrook Graves, it was his father who was the judge, and he talked to his father and said, let us take Ebby with us with the Oxford group because they were members, and we'll try to straighten out Ebby. The judge agreed. Don't forget that Ebby came from money, prestigious family. So he goes with and stays at who we learn a lot about Roland Hazard, stays at his place and starts to get the Oxford group teachings. And that's where now Ebby has come 2 months after being sober. He's come to speak to Bill about his drinking and to try to see if he can help Bill. So one of the steps that we learn about, and Oxford group did not have steps, but was to help other people. One of the things that had changed in Ebby's life is that now he's here trying to help Bill. So let's read about the story. The door opened and he stood there, fresh skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had gotten into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, I've got religion.
Yeah, so Ebby is basically coming for the first time in a long time to see Bill, and surprisingly, Ebby is in great shape. I think he's been sober for approximately 2 months at this point, close to a little over 2 months, about 2.5 months. And there he is, ready to go and ready to carry the message forward and hopefully get Bill excited about it. And here we are. So it's quite the surprise to Bill. Rob?
Yeah. I got a question in the chat. Why did Bill apologize to the lady? It was about when he was on the airplane Jag. That was at the top of the page here on page 9. Bill and Ebby went on airplane Jag. In other words, what they did is they flew into the Manchester airport. They were so drunk when they got there that they fell out of the plane. Bill did not know what he said or did, but was quite embarrassed and sent an apology letter saying that if I said or did something, I apologize. In fact, the apology letter is in there. And that's why he apologized for the condition that they showed up in. So I hope that helps. So I just wanted to throw some pictures in there.
Yeah.
Okay. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. But bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching.
Yeah, so it's kind of humorous here. Bill is sitting back and is surprised by Ebby's appearance and approach and condition. And he's thinking to himself, well, that's good because now that he's not drinking, that means my gin will last longer and I can drink more. But just one of those, but he's also curious, which is the first sign of Bill's potential or impending direction towards recovery. But at least at this point, he's at least interested in what's going on with Ebby. Right?
Yeah, but he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told me, remember that, matter-of-fact way. Okay? He told how two men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked.
Yeah, so Ebby is talking about a couple of guys from the Oxford group and had come in and actually persuaded the judge to suspend his sentence, and they took him on, and Ebby responded well to it. It was definitely something that was helpful, and the practical program of action. So the idea here was just a few steps. There wasn't that many at the time, and they were Oxford Group program stuff. Less so of trying to get them to stop drinking as much as it was to get religion. Rob?
Yeah. 2 months. Ebby was sober 2 months. How many times have you heard in the rooms that you can't sponsor people or can't help people unless you've been sober a year? Ebby, 2 months sober. Okay, we have to remember these things. Okay, it doesn't matter how long you're sober. If you're sober for 3 days and somebody new comes into the room, you can help them. Okay, you can tell them how you stayed sober for 3 days because they don't see 3 days. They've only seen today. And how am I going to make it through 3 days? You can show them where the coffee is in meetings. You can show them tell them where the good meetings are. There are so many things that we can do for people. Okay, make them feel welcome. Remember, a lot of the times when we're in our cups, we are not welcome anywhere. Okay, people don't want anything to do with us. They want to stay away from it. Okay, we can help people. No matter how long in sobriety you have, you can help. Okay, never forget that's our responsibility is to help other people. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sunday, way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. His insistence that their spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard.
Yeah, so Bill is responding at least to Ebby's discussion here. They talk for hours. Ebby is definitely talking about himself, which is what we talk about in the beginning here, to talk kind of about yourself and about your alcoholism and that type of thing, so that the person that you're talking with relates to that. So gets some of those, that sort of happened to me. Will that happen to me as well, et cetera, et cetera. And he's also talking about a time when he was a kid and going to church, and they used to um, um, uh, put out well, Bill, it was a promise that you would never drink, and he resisted doing that. And I think at this point in time, it was also that the time that Bill decided to stop going to church, in part because of that. Rob?
Yeah, he was to sign a temperance pledge, and which was going to say that I will not drink. And Bill didn't know whether he was going to drink when he got a little bit older, so he refused to sign it. You know, and was not going to do something that he just didn't believe in. You know, here we go. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are. So that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indication, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlie all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in the spirit of the universe. It knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone.
Yeah. So he's always believed in a power greater than himself. Um, but at the time, he actually believed in, things more concrete, such as chemists and evolutionists, etc. And uh, so he had little doubt that there's mighty purpose and rhythm that underlay it all. So, but he's still resisting that, at least not resisting so much as just not necessarily grasping a hold of it. Um, but he's starting to contemplate the idea of a power greater than himself, and maybe that's something that he should be more interested in. Rob?
Yeah, here again, Bill mentions Winchester Cathedral. And, something moved Bill so much when he was at Winchester Cathedral that every time he thinks about it, it moves him. Now, in Bill's original story that he wrote for what was originally going to be in the back of the book, it had been edited. But I want to read something that came from writing the big book. And this is from Bill Schaefer writing, who was the author of that book. The earlier version of the text provided concrete details for why Bill was so moved that day in England. We were in England. I stood in Winchester Cathedral with head bowed in the presence of something I had never felt before. Where now was the God of the preachers? Across the channel, thousands were perishing that day. Why did he not come? Suddenly, in that moment of darkness, he was there. I felt an enveloping, comforting presence. Tears stood in my eyes. I had glimpsed a great reality. Much moved, I wandered through the cathedral yard. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone. Here lies the Hampshire Grenadier, who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier ne'er forgot, whether he dieth by musket or by pot. My mood changed. A squadron of fighters roared overhead. I cried to myself, "Here's to adventure!" The feeling of being in the great presence disappeared. Now that was edited out of Bill's story, but it gives a little more information of why Bill was so moved at Winchester Cathedral. Hope you enjoyed that. If not, I apologize. Okay. With ministers in the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated, and my mind snapped shut against such a theory.
Yeah, so this is a sentiment that is repeated over and over, and I hear it often in the rooms of AA that people, when we start talking of a higher power, and in some cases, most cases, a lot of people call it God, it actually is something that they resist and actually get irritated at. I certainly was not necessarily in the know at the time, and when I did get people talking strongly about God and a higher power, I also resisted and decided that this wasn't for me. At least that's what I was partially thinking. So just one of those type of places where it's common in AA that people don't want this to be about religion, and it certainly isn't. But when you sit down and think about it, and that the difference is here, we're talking about a spiritual experience and something more spiritual than religious. Rob?
Yeah, and we talked, Bill mentioned what his definition of an atheist. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. So that's Bill's definition, which will come in handy later on when we get to we agnostics. So top of page 11, everybody. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teachings, most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregard.
Yeah, so it's basically still thinking about this. Christ considered the certainty of a great man, followed by those who claimed him, his moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. So it was kind of like a menu driven kind of approach to religion and God. And that was certainly something that we also kind of talk about here, that there's not bits and pieces or parts of this program that you can take and leave the rest. You have to embrace it all. And we'll soon find that out as we read more into this book. Rob?
Yeah, and remember, this is the only page that mentioned Christ, the devil, and God all in the same page. The wars which have been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated, made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me.
Yep, and you can see here that he's capitalized a few words in here: man, devil, boss, universal. We're talking about not God, but other things, and things that he had seen during the war had convinced him that there was no God, or at least not one that was positive, and he is very doubtful at this point. Rob?
Yeah, chicanery. I've got artful trickery, deception by trickery, or misleading reasoning. I'll put that in the chat for people if you want to write it down. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had
Yeah.
this power, sorry, go ahead, Leo.
Oh no, it was fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. There'd be no more power in him than there was in me at that moment, and this was none at all.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leo.
Yeah. No. So point here is that if we were take this, my friend sat before me. He'd made the point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. We're basically for the first time talking about this higher power, and his human will had failed. And he was basically hopeless in the eyes of doctors. And he was about to go to jail and be incarcerated for things that he had done. And this is basically him telling his story of his plight, and that he basically was able to find he was at a point where he had no human power and needed something bigger and than that, and that is when he had done basically talking about God and his higher power. It also makes a point that Bill is admitting that he is in the same place and that he has got no more power in him either was available to get him through this. Rob?
Yeah, Bill has no power. He is powerless. Okay. And, he knew that Ebby had no power too, but all of a sudden, he's better. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings.
Yeah. So Bill is starting to take note. He's noticing that he is starting to accept the idea that this higher power is something that he could tap into. And not only that, but here was proof right there in front of him, which was Ebby Thatcher. And he basically admits that Ebby had done the impossible. Rob?
I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped new soil. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way.
Yeah, there's a lot of thinking here going on in this paragraph. His going back, he was different. Ebby was on different footing. His roots grasped new soil. Just a great way of saying that there was a new beginning here. And despite his all this, his old prejudices were still in play, and he still was resisting the idea of God and or a higher power, and that was he could grasp some of it, but not all of it, and the feeling was intensified, as it says here, that he was resisting at this point. Rob?
Yep. Now comes one of the greatest lines in the book. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, quote, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Bill is having kind of a white light experience. The idea that he could choose his own conception of God was something that interested him greatly, and it knocked him for a loop and melted away the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. He was, again, now having that white light experience and having what we now call as a spiritual experience, and finding that higher power. Rob?
A lot of us come into the fellowship with the idea of religion from when we were children. God is a punishing God. Don't do that. God will be disappointed. You're going to get in trouble with God. God's going to be very disappointed in you. So we think of God as a punishing God because of our childhood. A lot of times people use that in order to try to control young children. So we come in with these preconceived ideas. Now, Ebby is telling Bill, come up with your own conception of God. What would you want God to be if you could choose? A whole new way of life opens up for Bill. It has opened up for an awful lot of people in the fellowship because of their upbringing and what they think God is, or who God is, or what God is, all these things. So is it time to bring in, and next week we'll start with the squiggly writing, which is italics, which means it must be really important. So why don't we bring in Bill, and we'll save that for next week.
I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo.
Yeah, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, guys. Good job today. This is a really good story here, Bill's story. It's got virtually everything in it. It's got the drunkalog. It's got how the classic 12-step call. It's got the 12 steps in it. It's got how to stay sober. It's got the whole program right here in Bill's story. Now, when we started today, this is basically when Bill's getting to the end of his drinking. He's getting into the final stages of alcoholism. The fun and the games and the block parties and barbecues, all of that stuff is gone at this point. He's drinking now because he has to drink, and he's to the point where he's ready to jump through the window in the middle of the night. And and they had to call a doctor, and he had to be sedated because he was cracking up. He's basically on the verge of going into the DTs. Then he winds up going into the hospital, and that's where he met Dr. Silkworth, and Dr. Silkworth explained some of the what alcoholism was to him so that he could understand it. And he gave him his rendition of what alcoholism was, and Bill understood now that his willpower is weakened, but he thinks that as long as he has self-knowledge, that's going to keep him sober. And obviously that doesn't work because he starts drinking again, and he winds up in the hospital again and again. So he's back and forth to the hospital several times, and every time he goes there, Dr. Silkworth tries to explain to him what's going on with him. They put him on this belladonna treatment, which is some type of a sedative. It was supposed to relieve some of the withdrawal symptoms, but that stuff only works temporarily. Then it talks on page 8. It says, "No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master." Most people consider that Bill Wilson doing what we call step one. He's admitting that he's defeated. He's admitting he's powerless over alcohol. Alcohol is his master. Now, after you do step one, what happens? You think that's going to keep you sober? No, because right after that, in the next paragraph, he went right back out on Armistice Day and he started drinking again. And he drank for approximately 1 month because Armistice Day is November 11th, and he drank and he wound up going back into the hospital on December 11th. So that's when he had his last drink as he was walking into the hospital on December 11th. So it was a 1 month spree or 1 month debauch, whatever you want to call it. And that's basically what he did. And Ebby came over in between that time. Ebby showed up near the end of the bleak November. And what Ebby did what we would call the classic 12-step call. He came over and he talked to Bill and he told Bill what Ebby did so Ebby didn't have to drink anymore. And most of all of this stuff that they're talking about in here is all the time that Ebby was there, right up here where we left off. This is all the stuff that Ebby is telling Bill out during this, if you want to call it a 12-step call. At the time, there was no 12 steps yet. But this is Ebby trying to carry the message of sobriety to Bill Wilson. And thank God he did. And like it was already mentioned, Rob mentioned it, he had 2 months of sobriety when he carried the message to Bill. And you'll hear in the rooms you have to have a year before you do anything. That's nowhere in this book. You don't have to have a year. You don't have to have, there's no time limit in AA. Once you've gone through this process and you've got it and you understand it, you can transfer it to someone else. And even if you haven't been through all of the 12 steps yet, like Rob mentioned, if you got 3 days of sobriety and somebody walks in the door with 1 day, you can tell them where the coffee is, where the donuts are. You can give them a meeting book. You can get their number. You can give them your number. You can be diplomatic to them. You can show them fellowship. You can introduce them to some of the other people in the room. You can tell them what you did today so you don't have to drink. So you can start helping somebody as soon as you sober up. There's no time limit on this that you have to wait a certain amount of time. Thank God Ebby didn't know he was supposed to wait a year before he could help somebody. He would have never went and saw Bill. And if he never went and saw Bill, who knows if AA would have ever got started, and who knows where any of us would be today. So don't let anybody tell you that you have to have a certain amount of time before you can do anything. And the treatment for alcoholism is carrying the message to another alcoholic. That's what makes us better. And if we're telling people that they have to wait a year before they can get to the solution for alcoholism, why are we doing that? Why are people keeping people from the solution for a year? We're supposed to get to the solution as quickly as we possibly can. And there's so many little stories in here. It would take me almost an hour to go over all the stuff that Bill did and everything that was going on. But pretty basically, and like Rob pointed out, one of the most important things in this book on page 12, it says, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" That statement probably helped more people get through the steps than anything else. You don't have to believe what I believe. I don't have to believe what you believe. Whatever your conception of God is, whatever you think the word God means, you can use that. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't have to believe the same thing that anybody else believes. As long as you believe you're not God, you're on the right track, and that's that. And you can use your own conception, and that can help you get through these steps. That's pretty much all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate
Oh.
you, sir.
Yep, we sure do. All right, Rob, we'll go ahead and close out with the serenity prayer.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.